At a masquerade ball, a millionaire CEO kissed a woman, unaware she was his secretary. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Ethan Caldwell stands at the edge of the grand ballroom as violins glide through the air and crystal chandeliers scatter warm light across polished marble floors. A winter night in Manhattan, humming with quiet luxury and careful smiles. Masks hide familiar faces, silk and satin soften sharp reputations. And for once Ethan is not the CEO people approach with rehearsed admiration. Tonight he is simply a man behind a black velvet mask, anonymous, unmeasured, free to breathe. He watches couples move in slow circles, hears laughter that does not ask for favors, and feels something loosen in his chest as the rules he enforces every day seem to fade under the music. Then he notices her. She wears a simple ivory mask, not extravagant, not attention-seeking, and when she steps into the light, he catches the calm in her posture. The way she listens before she speaks, the way she holds herself like someone used to being overlooked and perfectly fine with it. Their eyes meet, and there is a pause that feels longer than a second, as if the room waits with them. He offers his hand without thinking, and she accepts with a nod that says she chose this, not that she was impressed by it. They dance. The floor glides beneath their feet, the music settles into a steady rhythm, and conversation arrives easily, surprising him with its honesty. She speaks about small things with depth, about work that demands precision, about finding satisfaction in doing something well even when no one applauds. He listens, truly listens, and realizes how rare that has become. When he asks her name, she smiles and deflects, playful, careful, and he mirrors her restraint, enjoying the strange safety of not being known. A laugh escapes her at something he says, warm and unguarded, and it lands in him. Like a reminder of a life he once had before boardrooms and headlines. The dance ends, but neither steps away. The music softens, the crowd shifts, and a hush settles between them that feels earned. He notices a faint mark at her wrist when she adjusts her glove, a small detail that grounds the moment, makes it real. She looks up at him as if asking a question she will not voice, and he answers without words, leaning in just enough to close the distance. The kiss is brief, gentle, and unmistakably human, a promise without terms, a spark that asks for nothing but presence. When they part, there is no applause, only the soft thrum of his heart and the certainty that something has changed. She steps back first, eyes bright behind the mask, then turns and disappears into the swirl of guests before he can follow, leaving behind the echo of her voice and the warmth of a choice freely made. Ethan stands still as the music swells again, surrounded by elegance yet focused on the absence she leaves, wondering who she is, where she came from, and why the thought of never seeing her again feels heavier than any deal he has ever lost. Unaware that the woman he kissed under the chandeliers is the very person who schedules his days, guards his time, and sits quietly outside his office every morning, his secretary, whose name he will hear tomorrow spoken plainly, without a mask. Morning arrives with a sharp clarity that feels almost unfair, sunlight cutting between glass towers and laying clean lines across Ethan Caldwell's penthouse windows as the city resumes its disciplined rhythm. He stands still longer than usual, coffee cooling in his hand, replaying a night that refuses to settle into memory like a dream. The masquerade ball was supposed to be harmless theater, a charity obligation wrapped in velvet and violin strings, yet the echo of one quiet laugh and the certainty of a gentle kiss linger with a persistence that makes the day feel slightly out of focus. By 8:30 he is back in the black sedan, crossing avenues measured in blocks and minutes, the driver announcing arrivals and departures like punctuation marks in a sentence Ethan knows by heart. At the office, the lobby hums with efficiency, security gates blink green, elevators glide upward, and the Caldwell Group logo gleams with the confidence of decades. He steps out onto his floor, and the world snaps into place, assistants moving with purpose, phones chiming, schedules breathing. And then he sees her, Claire Morgan sits at her desk just outside his office, posture straight, eyes calm, hair neatly pulled back, a legal pad aligned with the edge of the table as if the building itself has rules she respects. She looks up at the sound of his steps and offers the professional smile he expects, the one that never asks for more time than she is given. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," she says, voice even, familiar, and something in his chest shifts. He nods, murmurs a greeting, and walks past, unsettled by a sensation he cannot name, as though a door closed softly behind him. Inside his office, glass walls frame a skyline measured in miles, yet his focus narrows to the cadence of her voice filtering through the day. Meetings stack like files, decisions move millions of dollars with a signature, and still he catches fragments. The way she summarizes with precision, the way she chooses words that clarify rather than impress, the way she pauses to listen before she answers. It is nothing new. Claire has always been excellent, invisible excellence, the kind that makes systems work. But today, every small competence carries a strange familiarity, a warmth he cannot justify. Across the hall, Claire organizes his schedule with practiced care, unaware that the night she tucked away as a private memory is standing 10 feet from her, masked no longer by velvet, but by authority. She tells herself the ball was a borrowed moment, a kindness she allowed herself once, and she returns to the safety of routine. The office smells faintly of paper and coffee, the hours mark themselves, and at noon she delivers a folder with notes he requested. As she sets it down, he notices the steady grace of her hands, the brief lift of her sleeve, a hint of skin before fabric settles back into place. He thanks her, too quickly, then asks a follow-up question he does not need answered. She responds with clarity, eyes meeting his for a second longer than usual, and he feels the odd certainty that he has missed something obvious. The afternoon moves on, yet the distance between them feels newly charged, two lives aligned by habit and separated by knowledge neither possesses. Ethan wonders why a stranger's absence weighs more than the presence of the person who knows his days better than anyone else. Claire wonders why the city feels louder today, why the man she kissed feels both closer and impossibly far, and both return to their work believing the worlds they inhabit are separate, unaware that the line between them has already begun to blur. The week settles into a pattern that should feel ordinary, yet small details begin to surface like quiet signals Ethan cannot ignore, and each one tightens his focus without revealing why. He notices it first in meetings, when Claire speaks to summarize complex points with a cadence that feels familiar, measured and thoughtful, never rushing to fill silence. Her voice carries the same calm assurance he remembers from the dance floor, a tone that had cut through music and masks and made him listen. He tells himself it is coincidence, that thousands of people sound confident when they know their work, but the thought does not hold. On Wednesday afternoon, a rainstorm sweeps across Midtown, tapping against the windows in steady lines, and the office smells faintly of ozone and paper. Claire brings him a revised agenda, precise to the minute, and as she sets it down, she mentions a small adjustment with a phrasing that echoes something he heard under chandeliers, a sentence about choosing clarity over noise. The words land with a soft jolt. He looks up too quickly, catches her eyes, and for a second neither of them speaks. She blinks, professional composure intact, and continues, unaware that the room has narrowed around them. Across the glass wall, assistants pass, phones ring, and time keeps moving. Ethan asks a question he does not need answered, just to hear her speak again, and she does, steady and unassuming, then steps away. He leans back, heart ticking faster than the clock on the wall, wondering how a stranger could leave such a clear imprint. Claire, for her part, is determined to let the past remain where it belongs. She keeps her focus on details, on margins and deadlines, on the quiet satisfaction of a system working because she tended it. Yet she senses the change too, a slight shift in the air when Ethan addresses her, a pause that was not there before. She notices how often he listens. Now, really listens, and how that attention makes her careful with her words. On Thursday evening, as the office thins and the city glows beyond the windows, she reaches for a file on the top shelf, sleeves slipping back for an instant as she stretches. A thin scar curves along her wrist, pale and unobtrusive, a reminder of a long-healed accident she rarely thinks about. She does not see Ethan glance up at that exact moment, does not see his eyes narrow as recognition stirs without forming. He remembers the same brief reveal beneath a mask, the same mark that grounded a fleeting night in something real. The image stays with him through dinner meetings measured in blocks and miles, through a late ride home when the city lights blur. By Friday morning, the office hum feels louder, the routine sharper. Ethan catches himself waiting for the sound of Claire's footsteps, for the soft knock that precedes her updates. When she arrives with coffee he did not ask for but always drinks, he thanks her and asks how her week has been, a question that surprises them both. She answers honestly, briefly, then smiles, a small curve that mirrors a smile he remembers seeing through ivory silk. They share a moment that feels both ordinary and charged, then return to their roles. All day, Ethan catalogs the details he has planted without meaning to, the voice, the words, the scar, assembling them without conclusion. Claire gathers her things at 5:30, glancing once toward his office as she leaves, telling herself the night of music and masks was a closed chapter. Neither realizes that the pieces they carry are aligning, that the quiet signals are preparing a truth neither is ready to face, and that the calm of routine is the last shelter before recognition arrives. Monday reshapes their proximity into something unavoidable when Ethan announces a condensed project timeline that pulls his inner team closer, hours stretching longer and conversations narrowing to essentials. Claire adjusts without comment, reorganizing schedules measured in minutes and blocks, ensuring every moving part aligns. Late afternoons turn into evenings, the office lights dimming floor by floor until their corridor feels like a quiet channel carved through the city's glow. Ethan finds himself asking for her perspective more often, framing it as efficiency, as clarity, as anything but curiosity. She responds with precision, offering insights that anticipate problems before they surface, and each exchange leaves him with the same unsettled warmth he felt beneath chandeliers. One night, as rain polishes the sidewalks below into mirrors, he suggests they review materials together in the conference room to avoid interruptions. The room smells faintly of leather and clean wood, the long table reflecting the skyline in softened lines. They sit across from each other, papers between them, and work moves swiftly, efficiently, until it pauses on a decision that demands judgment rather than data. Claire weighs options carefully, then chooses words that balance risk and fairness, the same instinct he remembers from a dance floor where nothing was at stake and everything felt true. He nods, approving the choice, surprised by how much relief it brings him to trust someone without reservation. The silence that follows is not awkward, it is attentive. He notices the rhythm of her breathing, the way she tucks a strand of hair behind her ear when thinking, small habits that feel newly vivid. Claire feels it too, the narrowing of the room, the sense that attention has weight. She reminds herself of lines she never crosses, of roles that protect both of them, and keeps her posture professional. Yet when he thanks her, not with formality but with something softer, she meets his eyes and holds the look a beat longer than necessary. Another evening ends with a shared elevator ride, the doors closing on a mirrored reflection that places them side by side. The car hums downward through floors counted in seconds. He asks about her commute, about neighborhoods measured in miles rather than titles, and she answers easily, surprised by how normal the questions feel. When the doors open, they part with a simple good night that carries more than it says. Over the next days, the pattern deepens. Coffee arrives when his focus wanes. A calendar shift saves him an hour. He returns the consideration with space, with respect, with listening. The office notices the efficiency, but not the current beneath it. One afternoon, a printer stalls and Claire kneels to clear a jam, sleeves slipping back again. Ethan looks away deliberately, yet the image imprints, the memory aligning itself with certainty he refuses to name. He catches the echo of her laughter in the hallway, brief and unguarded, and it lands like a promise he did not ask for. Claire tells herself she is projecting meaning onto competence, that attention does not equal intention. She keeps her boundaries firm, even as the work pulls them closer. When Ethan suggests a quick walk to clear their heads, measured in blocks around the building, she agrees because it is reasonable. Outside, the air is crisp, the city moving with purpose. They talk about nothing important and everything revealing, about favorite quiet places, about choosing substance over spectacle. At the corner, a crosswalk counts down, numbers shrinking, and for a moment they stand close enough to feel the warmth of each other's presence without touching. The light changes, they move, and the moment passes. Back upstairs, they return to their desks, roles intact, unaware that the closeness they are building is already testing the fragile distance between who they believe the other to be and who the other truly is. The project reaches its midpoint and the pace sharpens, days measured in half hours and nights in the glow of desk lamps that soften the edges of everything. Ethan and Claire fall into an unspoken rhythm that feels earned rather than assumed, a choreography of work that leaves little room for missteps. He learns how she thinks before she speaks, how she anticipates the questions that will matter in a room full of confident voices, and he finds himself calibrating decisions around her quiet assessments. She learns the contours of his focus, when to interrupt and when to shield him from noise, and the trust between them deepens without ceremony. One evening stretches late, the building nearly empty, and the hum of the ventilation becomes a steady companion. Ethan orders takeout for the team and, when it dwindles to just the two of them, asks what she prefers. She smiles at the practicality of the question and chooses something simple, a detail that settles him. They eat at the conference table, plates balanced beside papers, talking about the project until conversation drifts to the city outside, to neighborhoods measured in miles and memories. Claire mentions a small park she visits on weekends, quiet even at noon, and Ethan admits he has not sat on a bench without an agenda in years. The admission surprises him, and her listening makes it feel safe. Over the next days, moments like these accumulate. A shared laugh over a misfired presentation slide. A pause before a difficult call where he looks to her and finds reassurance in a nod. The way she says his name when clarity matters, not as a title, but as a person. Claire remains careful, aware of lines and optics, yet she cannot deny the pull of being seen for her mind rather than her position. She notices how he makes space for her voice in rooms that used to compress it, how he credits ideas without embellishment, how respect becomes the default rather than a performance. One afternoon, as sunlight angles through the windows at a low slant, they walk through figures together, shoulders aligned but not touching. The closeness feels natural, unremarkable, and that is what makes it dangerous. Ethan senses it too, a growing certainty that the woman he is coming to rely on is not a projection of a knight masked in silk, but someone real and present. The memory of the ball fades into the background as the present takes shape, and yet small echoes persist, the timbre of her laughter, the way she chooses words that value substance over spectacle. When a decision goes well, he thanks her with a sincerity that carries weight, and she feels it settle in her chest like a promise she does not intend to collect. A weekend arrives with no meetings scheduled, and the absence feels loud. Ethan considers reaching out, then stops, reminding himself of boundaries that exist for reasons beyond comfort. Claire spends the Saturday morning at her quiet park, coffee warming her hands, telling herself that steadiness is enough. On Sunday evening, she reviews notes for the coming week and finds a handwritten margin comment from him, thoughtful and precise, and smiles before she can stop herself. Monday brings a pivotal review, and they prepare together, timing rehearsed to the minute. In the boardroom, voices overlap, pressure builds, and Claire watches Ethan navigate with confidence that is grounded rather than sharp. When the decision lands in their favor, relief spreads through the room like a held breath released. Later, back in the hallway, they share a look that says more than celebration, a recognition of effort shared and trust earned. The bond between them has grown quietly, deliberately, built on work and respect, and neither acknowledges how easily it could tip into something else. As they return to their desks, the city resumes its measured pace, and the distance they have maintained feels thinner than before, a fragile line that the next truth will test. The reveal arrives not with spectacle but with inevitability, a quiet alignment of details that refuses to be ignored. It begins at a client reception hosted in the building's upper lounge, a restrained affair with soft lighting and glass walls that frame the river like a moving painting. Ethan attends because it is expected. Claire attends because she always does, prepared and precise, a presence that steadies the room. As guests circulate, conversation floats in careful arcs, and Ethan finds himself listening for one voice amid the hum. When Claire joins a small circle to clarify a point, she speaks with the same composed assurance he has come to rely on, choosing clarity over noise, and the phrase lands with a sudden weight. He feels it as recognition rather than surprise, a click in the mind that gathers everything he has planted over weeks. He watches her gesture as she explains, and when her sleeve shifts, the thin scar at her wrist catches the light. The room seems to narrow. The music softens to background. The memory of chandeliers and an ivory mask overlays the present with unsettling precision. He excuses himself, heart steady but loud, and waits by the windows as guests drift past. Claire finishes her exchange and approaches to check the next agenda item. She stops when she sees his expression, attentive but changed. He asks a simple question about the schedule, then another, and then, carefully, he repeats a sentence she once said beneath a mask, word for word, the cadence intact. Her breath catches. She recognizes the sentence because she has carried it too, tucked away as something private and complete. She looks at him, really looks, and the years of professional distance compress into a single moment of clarity. The night of music and anonymity rises between them, undeniable now. The silence that follows is not empty. It is crowded with understanding. Ethan does not reach for authority or explanation. He names the truth as plainly as he can, that the woman he met without titles has been standing outside his office every morning, that the trust he has built was never mistaken but incomplete. Claire absorbs it with a steadiness that surprises her, even as something inside her tightens. She acknowledges the truth, too, that the man she kissed believing him to be unmeasured is the one who signs her paycheck, the one whose power reframes every memory. The imbalance asserts itself immediately, a fact neither can soften. Around them, the reception continues, laughter and clinking glassware marking time as if nothing has changed. Ethan feels the weight of his position for the first time not as leverage but as a risk, a shadow cast backward onto a moment that had felt clean. Claire feels the safety of the memory fracture, replaced by questions she did not ask then because she did not have to. They step aside to a quieter corner, not to resolve, but to name what exists. He says he will not pretend the knowledge does not matter. She says she will not pretend it does not alter the night. They agree, without negotiation, to pause, to let the truth settle without pressure. The professionalism they share becomes a bridge rather than a barrier, allowing them to exit the moment with dignity intact. When the event ends, they part with a look that carries respect and restraint, a recognition that something honest has been uncovered and cannot be put back. The elevator ride down is quiet, measured in floors and seconds, and when the doors open, they step into separate paths with the same care they brought to the work that bound them. Outside, the city moves as it always does, lights reflecting off water, blocks counted and crossed, and both understand that the story they told themselves about a harmless night has ended. What remains is a truth that demands choices, not feelings alone, and the next steps will test whether trust can survive knowledge. The days that follow feel deliberately restrained, as if the office itself has learned to lower its voice. Ethan and Claire move through schedules and meetings with practiced professionalism, their exchanges precise and limited to necessity. The ease they built does not vanish, but it tightens, framed now by knowledge neither can ignore. Ethan notices the distance first in small ways, the pause before Claire enters his office, the careful neutrality in her tone, the way she positions herself a step farther away when others are present. He understands why, and the understanding does not soften the weight. He spends long hours reviewing policies he once considered abstract, reading them now as boundaries with human consequence. Claire, meanwhile, carries the truth like a quiet burden. She performs flawlessly, yet the memory of a kiss chosen freely collides with the reality of hierarchy, and the collision leaves bruises she keeps to herself. When she looks at Ethan, she sees both the man who listened without titles and the authority that reframes every choice she makes. The conflict sharpens midweek when a colleague casually praises her recent visibility, suggesting it reflects well on leadership. The comment is meant kindly, but it lands with a thud. Claire feels the ground tilt beneath her confidence. and the safety she built through competence feels suddenly conditional. That afternoon, she asks for a meeting. Ethan agrees immediately, closing the glass door with a care that signals respect rather than secrecy. She speaks first, voice steady, explaining that the work has been meaningful and the trust genuine, but that perception matters, and power changes memory whether anyone intends it to or not. She tells him she does not want to question her own achievements or invite doubt into rooms she worked hard to earn. Ethan listens without interruption, the restraint costing him. He acknowledges the imbalance plainly, naming the harm that could grow from even unspoken assumptions. He does not defend the night or minimize the bond. He owns the reality that his position complicates everything. Claire asks for distance that protects them both. She requests a transfer to a parallel team, not as an escape, but as a boundary she needs to keep faith with herself. The request lands with clarity and consequence. Ethan feels the instinct to solve, to smooth, to keep what has become essential to his days, and he resists it. He agrees to the transfer without bargaining, committing to remove himself from the decision chain and document the process to ensure transparency. The relief in her shoulders is subtle but visible, and it steadies him. They outline next steps with the same precision they bring to work, calendars adjusted, responsibilities reassigned, language chosen carefully. When the meeting ends, they sit for a moment longer, the quiet carrying respect rather than regret. Outside the office, the city moves at its measured pace, and inside, a chapter closes with dignity. The following week unfolds with changes felt more than seen. Claire trains her successor, sharing knowledge generously, guarding nothing. Ethan notices the efficiency hold, the system proving stronger than any one connection, and the proof costs him more than he expected. They pass in hallways with courteous nods, exchanging updates through channels designed for distance. At night, Ethan walks miles without noticing the blocks, replaying choices not as mistakes, but as tests of character. Claire returns to her quiet park on Sunday morning, coffee warming her hands, acknowledging grief without surrendering to it. Both understand that the bond they formed was real and that reality now demands restraint. The fallout is not loud, but it is thorough, reshaping trust into something stricter and more honest, setting the stage for a decision that will require more than feeling to resolve. The change begins quietly, the way decisions that matter often do, with Ethan choosing process over impulse and documentation over reassurance. He convenes counsel and compliance not to ask permission, but to submit himself to rules he helped write, outlining a clear recusal from any decisions that could touch Claire's role or trajectory. Memos circulate, measured in pages and clauses, establishing boundaries that remove ambiguity rather than invite it. The transfer proceeds transparently, approvals logged, timelines published, and when questions arise, answers arrive promptly and in writing. In meetings, Ethan credits teams rather than individuals, redirecting praise towards systems and shared effort. The office absorbs the shift without spectacle, and the quiet steadiness becomes its own statement. Claire feels the effects before she reads them, in the way colleagues treat her work with the same seriousness as before, in the absence of whispers she feared would follow. She settles into the parallel team with familiar focus, building trust through competence rather than proximity, and the work responds in kind. Weeks pass measured in deliverables and miles walked, and the space between them holds. Then, at the quarterly town hall, Ethan steps onto the stage and speaks about governance not as constraint but as trust, about leadership as the willingness to be limited by fairness. He announces an update to internal policy that formalizes protections against power imbalance, including mandatory disclosures, third-party oversight, and clear paths for reassignment without penalty. He frames it not as reaction but as evolution, the company aligning practice with principle. The room listens, and the applause that follows is thoughtful rather than loud. Claire watches from the back, hearing her values echoed without her name attached, and feels something ease. Later that evening, Ethan leaves a handwritten note at the security desk addressed simply to Claire, not requesting a meeting, not offering explanation, but acknowledging the line she drew and thanking her for insisting on it. He includes no invitation, only a sentence that says he will continue to choose equality even when no one is watching. She reads it on her commute, the train counting stations like breaths, and keeps the note folded in her bag. The grand gesture is not a public declaration or a gift with weight, but the sustained choice to step back, to let absence prove intent. Over the following months, the company hosts an external audit of its culture practices, opening itself to critique with a candor that surprises skeptics. Recommendations are implemented, training rolled out, metrics published. Ethan attends sessions alongside new hires, listening more than speaking. Claire leads a cross-functional initiative in her new team that delivers early wins, and the recognition she receives is earned and clean. When paths cross at company events, they exchange a nod that carries respect without claim. One evening, after a long week, Claire sits on a bench in her quiet park as dusk settles, rereading the note and considering the weight of time. She realizes that what was offered was not persuasion but patience, not access but accountability. On a Monday morning, she sends a brief message through official channels, requesting a coffee outside office hours to discuss a non-work matter, specifying a neutral place measured in blocks from the building. Ethan receives it and waits a full hour before responding, accepting with clarity and confirming that neither will be beholden to the other. The meeting is scheduled weeks out, not rushed, and the distance holds until then, a proof that the choice has already been made. By choosing equality repeatedly and visibly, Ethan has shifted the ground on which any future decision will stand, and Claire, seeing the consistency rather than the promise, begins to consider whether trust rebuilt this way can carry more than it once did. The morning of their coffee arrives clear and unremarkable, the kind of day that refuses symbolism and invites honesty instead. Claire reaches the small cafe a few blocks from the building early, choosing a table by the window where foot traffic passes without noticing her. She orders simply and waits, breathing in the ordinary comfort of steam and low conversation. Ethan arrives on time, coat folded over his arm, expression open and careful. They greet each other without ceremony, two people meeting by choice rather than obligation. The conversation begins with ground rules spoken plainly, that this hour belongs to neither hierarchy nor history, that either of them can end it without explanation. Agreement settles easily between them, and with it a quiet relief. They speak first of work only to set it aside, acknowledging what was built and what was protected, then turn to the present. Ethan says he has learned to measure leadership by what he refuses to take, by the patience to let outcomes be chosen rather than claimed. Claire listens and responds with equal clarity, saying trust did not return because of policy alone, but because consistency replaced urgency. She tells him she needed to see restraint practiced repeatedly, not promised once. He accepts this without defense. Time passes unnoticed, minutes counted by sips and glances rather than clocks. Outside, the city keeps its pace, blocks crossed, deliveries made, lives continuing without regard for the decision forming inside the cafe. When the conversation reaches the night that began everything, they speak of it without romance, naming what was true and what changed. Claire says the memory mattered because it was chosen freely, without leverage, and that any future must be chosen the same way. Ethan agrees, saying he does not want to return to that night, but to meet her again as she is now, informed and unpressured. The clarity steadies them. When the cups are empty, Claire suggests a walk, measured in a few blocks, nothing more. They step outside into sunlight that sharpens edges and warms faces, walking side by side with space enough to choose closeness rather than assume it. At the corner, the crosswalk counts down, and they stop together, sharing a look that carries gratitude rather than longing. Claire speaks first, saying she is willing to try again under conditions that protect both of them, that any step forward must remain outside the office, transparent and slow. Ethan accepts without negotiation, adding that if at any point the balance tips, he will be the one to step back. The light changes, they cross, and the decision feels complete without ceremony. Weeks later, the rhythm settles into something new. Dinners measured in neighborhoods rather than floors, conversations that begin and end by mutual consent. At a company gallery opening months after the policy update, they arrive separately and leave separately, exchanging a smile that acknowledges the path they chose. Outside, beneath soft lights reflected on pavement, they pause. There are no masks, no titles, no audience. Ethan waits, hands open, and Claire closes the distance with intention. The kiss is brief and certain, a confirmation rather than a beginning, chosen with eyes open and ground level. They part with laughter that carries ease, stepping into the night as equals, knowing that what binds them now is not secrecy or power, but the shared discipline of choosing each other honestly.